Hey, so here's part 2 of my little story to share with you for ITP Awareness Month. And first I want to say that if you are actually taking the time to watch my videos and listen to my story, I really appreciate it. And I mean that from my heart, because I kind of feel like if you can take the time to dump a bucket of ice water over your head to raise awareness for a disease that you may or may not have ever heard of or know anything about. You may probably not even know anyone personally that has it. I feel like you just did it mainly because it was trendy and it was so fun to pour cold water over your head. Well, I'm not going to dump cold water over my fucking head. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tell you my story on my personal experience with an autoimmune disease that has no cure. And I think that if you really consider me to be your friend, could you just stop what you're doing and just sit and just listen to me for a minute? I'm trying to raise awareness for a disease that is real, and it almost killed me. And I'm trying to open this up to you guys and educate you, and just stop dumping fucking water over your head and just pay attention to me for a minute. I'm your friend. So with that being said, part 2. I got pregnant with Scarlett right before JP got deployed to Iraq the second time, and therefore I moved back with my parents. And I expected to have a completely normal pregnancy and delivery, and I was expecting to delivering on my own because JP would be deployed. And it turned out that things were not going to go that way, and it was going to be out of my hands. I had no say on how things were going to go. My platelets started dropping off just immediately, and the first order of business was I was getting vitamin B12 injections in my arms every week, and I was on the highest dose of prednisone. It's a steroid. I was on the highest dose of that because a normal person with ITP, it helps them keep their platelets a little bit longer. And really the only thing prednisone did for me was it made me an irritable bitch, it made me hungry, it made my skin crawl, and it gave me thrush. And that's about it. But I had to take it, and after that wasn't working, I had to move on to IVIG treatments, which is intravenous immunoglobulin. And what that is they take a sample of my blood and they cross-match it with, now hear me, 1,000 blood donors with the same blood type, okay? They have to find 1,000 of them and take those antibodies from the donations. It takes about 4 hours to make a bottle of IVIG treatment, and I've had 9. I've had 9 IVIG treatments, and they cost $20,000 each. So just let that sit in for a minute. They couldn't find enough compatible matches for my first one, so they had to have an IVIG treatment actually aerovac'd in from Rochester and brought to Watertown for me. And so I had that done, and when you have that, it can take really between 1 to 2 days to administer it, because they start it on a very slow pace and then they gradually increase it as you go along, however you can tolerate it. When they prep you to get this IVIG treatment, they give you Tylenol and Benadryl in your IV. And let me tell you, Benadryl in your IV is like hot fire. It is fire, and you can see your veins turn purple as it travels up in your arm, and it's just so hot. It was so hot. But I took such a great nap. Really. It was just nice to have a nap. And anyway, the IVIG treatment didn't work. And so they tried it again, and it didn't work, and they tried it again, and it didn't work, and so that's when I was transferred to Syracuse to see a high-risk OBGYN and hematologist there. And everything baby-wise, like Scarlett was growing just fine. Everything was great. Just my platelets were disappearing. And when my hematologist down there found out that the IVIG treatments weren't working, he's like, well, let's start checking for other things. So I was tested for von Willebrand's and lupus. They thought for sure I had lupus. Nope, that came back negative too. And then they decided to check me for cancer. They thought that I had leukemia. And hearing that as a pregnant mother, it was very emotional. The possibility that I had cancer while I had a precious baby in my womb. Like, how was I to protect the baby? I don't know. It was a little bit overwhelming. But thankfully, it came back negative. So that was great news. Bad news was they had no idea what was going on, so they decided to take a bone marrow biopsy out of my sternum. They usually take them out of your pelvis, but because they couldn't lay on my stomach because I was pregnant, they had to take it out of my sternum. The problem with your sternum is it's a very flimsy and thin bone, and it's very easy to break it. And so what they did is they numbed me down to the bone with like lidocaine or whatever, and they rubbed it all down, got all cleaned up, and then they get a corkscrew with like a hollow point, and they just start like twisting it into your bone. And I could hear it crunching, and I could feel it crunching into my bone, and like when they were doing it, I was getting small fractures all throughout my sternum because it's such a small and skinny bone. And then, so they did all the drilling, and they removed part of my bone, and they put a syringe in. And now when they take out bone marrow, it is about as thick as tar. And so it takes a lot of force to pull it out. And it was that time that the pressure was so intense. Like, I hollered, I yelled, I didn't even know it happened so fast. And like, having my sternum broken was like a piece of cake, but man, sucking that out, I was like, Lord have mercy. And my dad heard me down the hall, and my dad, he's a big burly man, and I have never seen that man scared my whole life. But I'll tell you, that day, that was the first time I saw my dad scared. Like, he heard somebody hurting his baby from down the hall, and like, he got all Papa Bear. I don't know. He just, that was the first time that like I saw my dad like really scared and like nervous about things. And yeah, so that was that was my first bone marrow biopsy. And the results that I got with that, they explained to me that a normal person with ITP, your bone marrow, because it's the factory in which all your blood cells are made, your body would try to overcompensate for what you're losing. And my body was not doing that. It was just saying, please take all my platelets, they're yours. Just take them, I'm quitting. And they were baffled with that. And so my hematologist consulted with all of his colleagues that he had all over the world, and nobody had seen a case like mine. So my doctor told me that as far as he knew, I was the only person in the entire world that had the strain of ITP that I have, and that they didn't know what to do, and that they were just going to have to play it by ear. And so that's what we did. I went to the doctor about 3 or 4 times a week to have my CBCs drawn. And before I was allowed to leave, I would always have to have a platelet transfusion because my platelets got so low that they were worried that if I was in any kind of collision or anything on the way home that I would die. Just flat out, they wanted to make sure I would make it home alive. So I thank my donors for that. I was getting platelet transfusions, like I said, 3 or 4 times a week. Once my platelets got to 15,000, let me put this into perspective for you. A normal person has between 150,000 to 450,000 blood platelets. 150,000 is still like low. Right now, I'm at about 109,000, I think was the last time I had it done, which that's great. That's like the best I've ever had for me, but it's low. Well, I had lower than 15,000 blood platelets at this time, and so I became a hemophiliac, which just basically means that any kind of like bumping or even just like sitting here, I could start hemorrhaging in my brain and die. Like just knocking my leg on a wall or something, like bumping it into a chair while I was walking by, like could cause me to hemorrhage uncontrollably. Like they were trying to be like so like bedside manner about it and being like, oh, just be careful, but like it was really serious stuff. And that's at the time that they decided that, you know, we should call the Red Cross and see about getting your husband home because it's now a life or death situation. So we called the Red Cross, and amazingly he came back on the next flight out. Well, the next flight out was on a weekend that my hematologist decided to put me in the hospital because he was wondering if he should take my spleen out. And in order to do that while you're pregnant, they would have to take the baby out while it's in your uterus, set it to the side, take the spleen out, and then put the baby back in. And he's like, oh, this is a really popular procedure to have your spleen taken out. And I was like, yeah, except for not when you're pregnant, so I don't give you permission to do that operation. And I was very sick that weekend. I was very anemic. They gave me like IV bags full of just brown liquid iron, and it made me so sick, and it made me so constipated, and it was awful. And I had to have the platelet transfusions on top of it, and then some of them I would reject them, and then some of them were, it was okay. But even like every single time I would have a platelet transfusion, 2 hours later, the platelets would already be killed off. And that's not normal either. So yeah, JP came home, and it was nice to have him there for the support because I really needed that from him, obviously. And he took me to all my appointments, and by the last month here, my arms were so bruised from having so much blood work done. Like it looked like domestic violence. It did. I'm not exaggerating. Like I was bruised on both my arms, and people would feel so bad, the phlebotomist, they'd be like, I really don't want to get you there. And I'd be like, just do it. Just take it. The veins, they're gorgeous. Just take it right through the bruise. I don't care. If you have to put an IV in my face, you can. It's fine. I've had so many IVs and stuff, like it doesn't even faze me. I'm used to it now. But so JP came home, and my platelets dropped down to 7,000, and they were very upset about that, because, well, that means that I'm like almost dead. And the night before Scarlett was born, I actually started like hemorrhaging in my mouth. My gums were bleeding, and I kept packing gauze in there, and I had swallowed so much blood in my sleep that I threw that up later. Anyway, so I went in, they were like, what's wrong with your face? It's like my gums are hemorrhaging, and they didn't even tell me what my platelet count was that morning. I'm assuming I had 0. and they gave me a platelet transfusion before I went in, and then they got another one ready right as I was rolling in. They started the second one, and JP wasn't allowed to come in the operating room with me, so I was really upset about that. And because any birth plan that I had was just, it didn't matter. What mattered was that they wanted to get me in. They wanted to cut me open and get Scarlet out and throw me back together as quickly as they could without me dying. That was what was important, and so I had to be okay with that. I wasn't, but I mean, I had to surrender and just let the doctors do their thing. So I went in the operating room, and JP wasn't allowed to go back with me because I was getting put to sleep. And they've got me just like naked, outstretched arms. There are like 30 doctors in there, 30 doctors, nurses. Like, they called a whole team of all of these doctors from like out of state to like work on this, because when they were getting ready to put me under, like, they told me that this is a very serious life or death situation. They told me that, but they were getting ready to pull me under, and my hematologist and my OBGYN were like, Kathleen, we just have to tell you that we're really concerned about your platelets, and we're going to work as quickly as we can. Like, the moment you go to sleep, we're going to start cutting, and we just want you to know that we're not sure if you're going to survive the delivery or not. You might not wake up. Excuse me. So, can you imagine hearing that? Like, it was already hard enough that, like, I had no control over a birth plan, and then right before you freaking knock me out, you tell me that I might not even live. And then I went to sleep, and they said that during my surgery I had to have 2 blood transfusions, and I had to have more platelet transfusions. And I'm going to share with you something. If you think it's gross, you can just go suck it, because it looks better now than it did when I was thrown back together, because my life was more important than my parents, and I had to have plastic surgery to like fix my scars. But anyway, and I was left with an umbilical hernia, 2 of them that had to get fixed. But these are my scars. As you can see, they had to cut from my belly button all the way down to my, I won't go too low there, you know, that's not your place, that's mine. Anyway, but I felt mutilated. I felt unattractive and mutilated for a very long time. And everyone would be like, oh, well, aren't you thankful to be alive? Of course I'm fucking thankful to be alive. I'm beyond thankful that I made it. And I was so proud. I was so proud. And I was so thankful for all of the doctors and everybody that everyone that gave me their platelets, because they saved my life. I'm sorry. I almost died to have Scarlet. And let me tell you what it feels like when you're dying. It's not warm, like they say in the movies. It's not. It's, at first it's kind of scary, and then it's just very calm. But it hurts. It hurts a lot, and it's very tiring. Like, to feel your body just want to just, like, give up. It was exhausting.
So, I'm gonna let you watch this. I don't care. Yeah, I had to have whole blood transfusions too because another thing they didn't know was that when, oh my God, I'm so crazy right now. When I lose a lot of blood, your body should compensate for that and make it again. And my body does not make blood fast enough when it's been lost. So I had to have whole blood transfusions just to get enough blood back in my system to where like I could stand or like even sit up without passing out. Anyway, and because they did my C-section that way because your blood vessels on your skin, there are less vessels down the middle of your stomach. And then they did the bikini incision on my uterus. And then they just threw me back together. And I was left with a scar about this big. And my skin was uneven. And I was left with, I used to have an innie. And then it was just a hernia just hanging out. I'm sorry if that's gross, but that's how I was because I had ITP. I had to have surgery that way because I was dying. But I got it fixed and I feel good about it now. Anyway, yeah, recovering from that type of C-section though was very difficult. It took me 5 days because they cut through all my abdominal muscles. It took me 5 days to learn how to walk in an upright position. Anytime I wanted to clear my throat, I had to like squeeze a pile of blankets into my stomach and like scream/cough. It was awful. But I was really proud of myself for being so determined to learn how to walk again and to stand up again. And I did it with my, oh, here it comes. Woo! The support of my loving husband. He's such a trooper. And yeah. So that was the first time I almost died. And then people started asking me stuff like, especially after I started having the other kids. I'll go on later about the other 2 times, but people like to ask me like, why would you be so selfish to have a baby again if you knew that it was like this dangerous? And you know, you can always adopt if you want more kids. And first of all, I can adopt, you're right. But I am in my own right to want to make my own children myself. And before you point your fingers and tell me that it's selfish, can you tell me one thing that is more selfless than putting your own life on the line to bring a beautiful, healthy baby, innocent baby, into the world? Can you tell me? Doesn't that make me selfless to do things like that? I mean, maybe you think that's crazy, but I don't know. There's something about that it made me so proud of myself that I did it, that I survived and I made a life. And it wasn't easy, but I did it for them. And it was so rewarding. So sorry. So if I want to have 3 or 4 kids and put myself through this every time, it's not your business. And to me, it's rewarding. And it makes me feel important. Now I'm looking ratchet. I said ratchet. I said ratchet. And it's okay. So, do you see how real this is? Do you care? Do you care?